New data shows that wealthy Chinese have been buying $8 million worth of Australian property every single day. All the while, millions of Australians are facing unprecedented rental stress, with hopes fading rapidly that they'll ever be able to afford their own home. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Today's show is not targeting races of people in any way. Australia is extremely multicultural, and that's what makes it so great. It's just those Greeks you gotta be worried about. Why they gotta put olive oil on everything? Lovey. We're specifically going to focus on foreign ownership of property. And guess what? It affects house prices. And because it affects house prices, you're gonna want to stick around. Recently, Tom Panos and Ben Fordham discussed this issue. So I want to start off watching some of this interview and then commenting.
Chinese buyers are spending $8 million a day on Aussie real estate.
$8 million per day is significant. And we're talking about people who live in China. They're not Australian citizens. Now, when it comes to foreign investment in Australian property, the majority by far is purchased from China, and we can see that here in this list. After China, we have investment from Hong Kong and Vietnam, and they purchase around the same amounts. And then we have the United Kingdom and Singapore, who also purchase around the same amounts.
Australia is now the top real estate investment location for Chinese buyers.
So out of every country in the entire world, currently, Chinese are buying more property from Australia than anywhere else. That's actually quite staggering if you think about it. Australia doesn't have a massive population, therefore available housing in Australia is a lot smaller than many other countries. Here's the top 10 properties in the world where Chinese are buying up property. Australia gets the most, followed by Canada, United Kingdom, then the United States. So why is it that Australian property is so sought after? Well, one reason is because they can. Australia has some rules and extra taxes for foreign investors. However, they still allow foreigners to buy Australian property. The next reason is that the Chinese property market has actually been crashing. You might remember the Chinese company Evergrande, which at one time was one of the largest global property developers. Well, they were teetering on collapse, somehow survived, but still in big trouble, reporting losses of $81 billion over the last 2 years. To get a feel for the Chinese property crash, newly constructed floor space dropped 39% in 2022 and a further 23% in the first 5 months of 2023. So with China's own property market facing a meltdown, many people will be looking to invest in foreign countries like Australia. And the third and probably most important reason that Chinese love Australian property is because Australian property is in a never-ending boom. In this lucky country, or unlucky if you don't own a home, government and RBA policies all but guarantee ultra high house prices. And because houses in Australia have risen so fast over the past 25 years, it's no wonder that investors from China and other countries want a piece of those gains. Alright, so foreign investors love our property. So what's the problem? I'll tell you the problem. We've got a housing affordability crisis in this country where house prices are some of the most expensive in the entire developed world. By allowing foreign investment, you add to the demand for property, which pushes up house prices, making them even more expensive. Now, because we're focusing on China, because they have such a large population, there's a significant number of ultra wealthy Chinese. And because of that, they don't care about paying extra taxes, and they end up being able to outbid local Australians. So Australian citizens are missing out on owning their own home because ultra wealthy foreigners have way more money than them and can basically pay any price to get the property. And what's even worse, many rich foreigners who buy Australian property can't claim deductions like negative gearing, and because of that may choose to leave the property empty. And what does that do? It removes supply from the market, creates extra demand because there's less properties available, and also worsens the current rental crisis, which is currently destroying a generation of renters. So it's a problem, in my opinion, a bloody big one.
But it is an issue, and you can sense resentment at auction auctions where there's a competition between a local buyer and an international buyer, and you'll see when the international buyer wins, they don't get the applause that they'd normally get if a local buyer. So you can tell there's tension there.
Of course there's tension. Trying to buy a house now is the hardest it's ever been in the history of Australia. And just imagine you've done everything you can. You've sacrificed, gone without to try and get a home deposit. Do your best to bid on a home you can afford just to find you get outbid by someone who doesn't even live in the country? That's a kick in the nuts if I've ever felt one. And it's just plain not right.
Should we be looking at what they've been doing in Canada, what they do in other countries where they just say, look, we need the houses for locals, so overseas buyers aren't going to be able to purchase?
Yes, we should ban foreign ownership, and we should ban it now. Canada's put in a 2-year temporary ban on foreign ownership to try and make more homes available for locals. And guess what? They needed to, because Canada, just like Australia, has some of the worst housing affordability in the entire world. And guess what? Chinese investors also love Canadian housing. And do you think it's a coincidence that the two countries the Chinese love the most for property is Australia and Canada? Two countries that have sent their house prices to the moon. Maybe it's not a coincidence.
There are two sides to the coin though, right, Tom? Because if you're being outbid by a foreign buyer at the auction, then you hate it. If you're selling your house, you love it, right? Because you've got someone with deep pockets who's willing to spend more than someone else who's at that auction.
Well, I can tell you, when I do auctions on a Saturday, I often have the vendor say to the agent in front of me, have we got any Chinese buyers?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
How sad that sellers know that if they have a Chinese buyer, that they're going to be able to sell for an unbelievable price. And yes, that price is great for the seller, but it's not great for our housing market, it's not great for our society, and it's definitely not great for future generations who may never be able to afford their own home because of policies like allowing foreign ownership of our property. Even if our government made a temporary ban like Canada, at least it would be something. You know what something's better than? Absolutely bloody nothing. Which is what Australia's done to try and improve housing affordability. Because guess what? They don't want to. Pauline Hanson also weighed in on this issue in a recent interview. She believes Australia needs to ban foreign investment to overcome the relentless housing availability crisis. She also believes the reported amount of foreign investment is understated because the checks and balances aren't occurring by the Foreign Investment Review Board. Pauline Hanson said that foreign investment drives up house prices, which puts them out of reach for many young people, but also if you're lucky enough to be able to afford a home, you have to get into so much more debt and you end up paying that for the rest of your life. Ultimately, Senator Hanson argued that by allowing foreign investment to continue, you're taking away access to the great Australian dream. And on that point, I 100% agree. I'm Biko Konstantinos.